Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Jana Ranjana Jaya Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Jana Ranjana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Gopinath, Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadramai. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtatarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhayachanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtatarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jainitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 5, Vidura's Talks with Maitreya, Text 47. Tatha pare chatma samadhi yoga. Tatha pare chatma samadhi yoga. Balena jitva prakritim balishtham. Balena jitva prakritim balishtham. Tvameva dhiraha purusham vishanti. Tvameva dhira purusham vishanti. Tesham shramah syanatu sevayate. Tesham shramah syanatu sevayate. Tatha pare chatma samadhi yoga. Balena jitva prakritim balishtham. Tvameva dhira purusham vishanti. Tesham shramasyanatu sevayate. Tatha pare chatma samadhi yoga. Balena jitva prakritim balishtham. Tvameva dhira purusham vishanti Tesham shamasya natu sevayate. Word for word, tata, as far as, apare, others, cha, also, atma samadhi, transcendental self-realization, yoga, means, balena, by the strength of, jitva, conquering, prakritim, acquired nature or modes of nature, balishtam, very powerful, tvam, you, eva, only, dhiraha, pacified, purusham, person, vishanti, enters into, tesham, for them, shramaha, much labor, syat, has to be taken, na, never, tu, but, sevaya, by serving, te, of you. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: others who are pacified by means of transcendental self-realization and have conquered over the modes of nature by dint of strong power and knowledge also enter into you. But for them there is much pain, whereas the devotee simply discharges devotional service and thus feels no such pain. Purport: in terms of a labor of love and its returns, the bhaktas or devotees of the Lord always have priority over persons who are addicted to the association of jnanis or impersonalists and yogis or mystics. The word apare, others, is very significant in this connection. Others refers to the jnanis and the yogis, whose only hope is to merge into the existence of the impersonal Brahmajyoti. Although their destination is not so important in comparison to the destination of the devotees, the labor of the non-devotees is far greater than that of the bhaktas. One may suggest that there is sufficient labor for the devotees also in the matter of discharging devotional service. But that labor is compensated by the enhancement of transcendental pleasure. The devotees derive more transcendental pleasure while engaged continuously in the service of the Lord than when they have no such engagement. In the family combination of a man and woman, there is much labor and responsibility for both of them. Yet when they are single, they feel more trouble for want of their united activities. The union of the impersonalists and the union of the devotees are not on par. The impersonalists try to fully stop their individuality by attaining sayujya mukti, or unification by merging into oneness, whereas the devotees keep their individuality to exchange feelings in relationship with the Supreme Individual Lord. Such reciprocation of feelings takes place in the transcendental Vaikuntha planets, and therefore the liberation sought by the impersonalists is already achieved in devotional service. The devotees attain mukti automatically while continuing the transcendental pleasure of maintaining individuality. As explained in the previous verse, the destination of the devotees is Vaikuntha, or Akuntadishnya, the place where anxieties are completely eradicated. One should not mistake the destination of the devotees and that of the impersonalists to be one and the same. The destinations are distinctly different, and the transcendental pleasure derived by the devotee is also distinct from chinmatra, or spiritual feelings alone. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpaturubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so in yesterday's verse, the translation said, O Lord, persons who because of their serious attitude attain the stage of enlightened devotional service, achieve the complete meaning of renunciation and knowledge. So it was talking about those people who are practicing the path of pure devotion, practicing the path of personalism. How, because of their serious attitude, they attain the complete goal, which is to develop pure love for Krishna, and ultimately they attain the Vaikuntha Loka in the spiritual sky simply by drinking the nectar of your topics. So in today's verse, it starts off by saying others. Others who are pacified by means of transcendental self-realization. Now, if you read the 10th canto, or if you read the Krishna book in Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll see that Krishna, when he met when he sent Uddhava to Vrindavan with the message for the gopis, he instructed them in Gyan Yoga. Right? And then again, when he met the residents of Vrindavan in Kurukshetra, many decades later, after seeing them after such a long time of absence in their association, again he instructed them in Gyan Yoga, but he gives a certain example, which is there in the Chatushloki as well. And the example is that of the elements. And he tells them that there's actually no need for you to feel separation from me, because just as the elements, right, are present, the Panchamabhuta, earth, fire, air, water, ether, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, they're separately existing on the shelves of the universe. At the same time, they're all pervading as well. Right? They're in all the different objects that we see around us. So they exist independently and separately. At the same time, they're all pervading. So in the same way, my dear residents of Vrindavan, there's no need for you to feel separation from me, because although I'm staying in Dwarka with the Vrishnis, with my queens there, I'm all pervading, so I'm present in Vrindavan as well. And Srila Prabhupada, or rather the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, when they're writing the purport there, they make the point that when Krishna is saying this, that he's all-pervading, this is actually satisfying or pacifying, right? Because the word is being used, pacified. This is actually pacifying for the jnanis and the yogis, right? Because the Jnanis are simply pacified, understanding that the spiritual energy is all-pervading, it's all one, and I merge with that. And they're pacified simply by that. But the devotees, because they understand the absolute truth on the personal platform, they want Krishna with them in Vrindavan as he is. Like the Acharyas explained that, the residents of Vrindavan could have easily just gone to Mathura. It's not so far from Vrindavan. Right? Krishna and Balram, when they went with Akrura, it took them less than a day to get to Mathura. So why didn't they just go and visit Krishna in Mathura? And the answer given is because they're personalists, they want to experience their relationship with Krishna, with Swayam Rup Krishna, in a particular way. It has to be in a particular way. Krishna has to look like Braja Krishna. Right? He can't be wearing shoes, he can't be wearing costly garments, he can't be wearing a crown on top of his head like Krishna does in Dwarka. He has to be wearing, his opulence in Vrindavan is different. It's just forest minerals and peacock feathers, right? Gunjamalas and all these things which are given in the Shastras. This is his opulence in Vrindavan. And that's the way that the residents of Vrindavan want to associate with him. So when Krishna tells them this knowledge that, yeah, it's okay, I'm present in Mathura, I'm present in Dwarka, but I'm all-pervading. Even though this is satisfying for the impersonalists, the others, for the devotee, this is actually not very satisfying. In fact, it brings them more pain. Because they want to experience Krishna not in the impersonal, all-pervading aspect, they want to experience Krishna in the localized personal aspect. Not as Paramatma, but as Bhagwan. Vatsalya moha guru gaurava sevya bhave sanchintya tasya sadrishim tanum apur ete. So it's mentioned in the Shastras that according to the cultivation of the mood that the devotee develops with Krishna as their devotion, yam kama krodha sahaja pranayadi bhiti, right? So one can develop a relationship based on lust, not the material lust, but spiritual lust. Then kama krodha, one can have a relationship with Krishna based on anger. Bhiti, with fear. Vatsalya, just like the parents of Krishna, Devaki and Vasudeva or Yashoda Nanda Maharaj, they have a relationship with Krishna based on Vatsalya. Moha, Guru Gaurava Sevya Bhave, one can have a relationship based on Krishna in the service attitude. There's different relationships that one can have with Krishna. Sanchintya tasya sadrishim tanum apur ete. Krishna manifests himself according to the form in which the devotee wants to have a relationship with him. So the residents of Vrindavan, being personalists, they want to have a relationship and associate with Krishna in a certain way. That's why even though Mathura is so close to them, they don't go there. Because they don't want to see, even though Krishna is there, Swayam Rup Krishna is there, they don't want to see Krishna in that particular form. Right? So, when the Vedic Shastras talk about the others, primarily they're talking about three different categories of people. They're talking about the karmis, they're talking about the jnanis, and they're talking about the yogis. So if you analyze it carefully, if you analyze the different types of consciousnesses which are there in this material manifestation, they will always fall. They will always fall. Like I'm talking about human beings, I'm not talking about animals, but I'm talking about the 400,000 species of human beings. They will always fall in one of these categories. Either someone will have a fruitive mentality of sense gratification, someone will be a jnani, they want to pursue knowledge, and they want to give up materialistic work, or they'll be a yogi. And beyond these three, there are the bhaktas, followers of Vedanta or Uttar Mimamsa. So we can see this as distinct categories. We can also see this as categories of elevation of consciousness. Just like if a conditioned soul, the reason why the conditioned soul comes into the material world is because of a desire to experience enjoyment separate from Krishna. So the most base sort of consciousness is the karmic consciousness. So we use the resources of material nature simply to satisfy our own senses. And this actually doesn't satisfy. It's first thing about material sense gratification is that it's not satisfying at all. It's not satisfying. It is temporary. That's mentioned in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that the yogis don't indulge in enjoying the objects of the senses because it's temporary. Antavanta. It's temporary. The third thing about material sense gratification is that you don't learn from it. Just like we've been reading recently in the last few verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, that by practicing devotional service, 2 things are developed. Do you know what they are? The 2 things which are developed? Knowledge and renunciation. Now, if you practice sense gratification instead of devotional service, then knowledge and renunciation are not developed. You don't renounce yourself. You don't develop a detachment from material sense gratification. In fact, if you look at the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that this lust, this fire of lust, it keeps raging more and more. The more you try to satisfy your senses in a materialistic way, you don't develop detachment at all. And secondly, you don't develop knowledge about your actual situation, who you are, why are you engaging in sense gratification, what is this material world, what is the process of liberation. All these types of knowledge are not developed in you. So it's very binding. That's the other thing. It's not fulfilling, it's temporary, it's binding, and the fourth thing about materialistic sense gratification is that you don't develop knowledge and you don't develop detachment from it. One may get fed up with material sense gratification. It's not really detachment, but you sort of just get burnt out. So, for example, if you overindulge in material sense gratification, then we know that too much of anything is a bad thing, right? So you get fed up. And then one wants to renounce material sense gratification. It's not detachment, it's not solid detachment. One just wants to temporarily stay away from it, and then one wants to become a jnani. This is the next step. So after intense sense gratification, one gets fed up, and then one wants to become a jnani. So it's like this pendulum effect of bhoga and tyaga. Too much bhoga results in tyaga, results in renunciation, but then staying in that platform of renunciation without experiencing a higher taste, one again goes back to the kami platform, one again goes back to the bhoga platform. So the elevation in consciousness is that, exactly what I mentioned, that you want to now stop materialistic activities. So that's what the jnani does. He stops materialistic activities and he starts to cultivate knowledge of a higher spiritual reality. If the jnani is fortunate, then through more knowledge, through spiritual knowledge, the jnani may become a yogi. The jnani may start to think that I don't want to go back to materialistic activity. I've cultivated knowledge of the spiritual reality. So let me try and find out how I can now act on the spiritual platform. And that's where yoga begins, the process of dhyan yoga begins. And there's a specific type of karma yoga that falls within Ashtanga yoga. It's called Kriya yoga. Ganesham Prabhu was mentioning Kriya yoga is the sort of like the beginning steps of Bhakti yoga or karma yoga in terms of serving Krishna for the Ashtanga yogis. Generally the Ashtanga yogis, they're working, but it's not very easy to see their work because their work is more mental, their work is more internal. They may do some asanas and some breathing practices and all that sort of stuff. But largely speaking, yoga rudha stage, instead of the yoga aruruksha stage in dhyan yoga. Aruruksha is the elementary stage where you're purifying your thoughts and your senses and you're drawing them inwards. Once you're able to do dharana, once you're able to fix your mind on the object of meditation, which for them ideally is Paramatma, then they stop acting outwardly and now they're acting internally. And just for the jnanis, like I think a few weeks ago Ganesham Prabhu was mentioning to us why the jnanis actually act on the materialistic platform. The reason is because they give up actually materialistic work and they cultivate knowledge of Brahman and then they go to Brahman. But because in Brahman there's no spiritual activity, right? You begin your spiritual activity on the platform of Ashtanga yoga. That's the beginnings of spiritual activity. You still don't know the person who you're supposed to be working for. in that sense, Dhyan Yoga is the process of finding that personality who you should be rendering service to, which is the Paramatma in the heart. So anyway, so the Jnanis, they go to the Brahman. There's no spiritual activity in Brahman. So then after some time, they fall back down to the material world. We know that. There's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam which talks about that. Yene, what is it? Yene Aravindaksha Vimuktamaninas. Aruya Krishna Parampadam Tata Patantyada Nadata Yushmar Angraya. So that verse explains that process of Jnanis, how they ascend to the Brahman in an unqualified way. They come back down. So why do they engage in materialistic activities? That's because they don't want to go back to Brahman again. Because going to Brahman means that there's no activities, they'll come back down. At the same time, they want to be happy, right? The reason why they gave up materialistic work is because they wanted to experience bliss and happiness. They wanted to experience the bliss and happiness in Brahman, because Brahman is just eternal, it's just existing eternal. In eternity, there's no birth, death, disease, old age, none of this is there. So they think that this is the pinnacle of happiness, and they go there. But then, having gone there, they come back to this world, this Mrityu Loka. They still have the tendency or the desire to experience happiness. But now they're forced to act on the materialistic platform because they don't have higher knowledge of devotional service and anandamai, right? Rendering service in relationship with Krishna, because they think the highest spiritual reality is Brahman, but they don't want to go there. So then they act on the materialistic platform to benefit everyone. That's why the Jnanis, although initially they give up materialistic work, because they don't ascend to the higher levels of Akunta, right? This verse is talking about Akunta Dishnyam. Vaikuntha Loka in the spiritual sky. They don't ascend there. They ascend to the Brahmajyoti. They come back down and act on the materialistic platform. So Srila Prabhupada is making the point here that it's a very difficult process. Labor of love, Srila Prabhupada is talking. That in all processes there is a labor of love. We can't say love actually for the other three processes, karma, jnana, and yoga, but at least for bhakti we can say there's a labor of love. But there is labor. There is definitely labor in all three processes. But Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the first paragraph that the labor which the devotee undergoes is very joyful, because when they're undertaking the labor, at the same time Krishna is giving them transcendental pleasure. Whereas for others, to experience pleasure, they have to reach the goal. Just like a karmi has to acquire the fruits of the sacrifice to enjoy. A karmi doesn't enjoy the austerity of undergoing the sacrifice, right? Or yogi has to actually attain the mystic siddhis to be able to enjoy. The jnani has to actually reach the Brahman effulgence to actually enjoy the existence of eternality. They can't do that while they're struggling in the material world. Whereas in bhakti, the process and the end, the means and the end goal is both transcendentally pleasurable. So the devotees, although they're undertaking labor, it's very pleasurable for them. And Srila Prabhupada is giving the example of a family combination of a man and a woman. There is much labor and responsibility for both of them, right? When they're trying to maintain a family, or even if they're a couple. Yet when they're single, they feel much more trouble for want of their united activities. So Krishna does the same thing. So Krishna, he feels, let's say, less transcendental pleasure when he's by himself, although he's Atmarama. Still, Krishna is enjoying with his energies. So in that sense, even though he's enjoying with another part and parcel, it's still his energy, and therefore he's still Atmarama. But it's explained that Eko Bahusyam, that's why Krishna expanded into countless, unlimited different parts and parcels, Vibhinamsha, jivas, so that he can have a loving relationship with them. And that relationship sometimes involves austerity, just like when a conditioned soul, when a soul decides to come to the mature world, then Krishna has to undertake the austerity of, first of all, creating the mature world. Right? We've been reading about how Krishna is doing the Sarga creation and then the Visarga creation. He has to create the mature world, he has to create the material elements, then he has to enter himself as the Paramatma, and lifetime after lifetime he has to stay there.
as a super soul, waiting and waiting, when will the soul turn to me? Right? He has to expand himself as the guna avatars to maintain and to finally destroy the material world. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse which actually explains that actually Krishna doesn't want the material world to be created. It's not pleasurable for him. He doesn't want this. So the very fact that he has to facilitate this for the conditioned souls, it's an austerity for him. But it's an austerity of love, it's a labor of love that Krishna undertakes, because he knows that the purpose of the material world is to educate the jiva, bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mapam prapadyante, that the jiva, when he undergoes his tenure in the material world, eventually he will turn back to me, and then we can have or resume our loving relationship together again. So that's karma and jnana. And then yoga has its own austerities as well. We know that, right? They have to renounce, they have to go to the forest, sit on a, that's mentioned in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, all the different, how the seat has to be. They have to be fully celibate. They have to do all these asanas, and it's a very mechanical process. Just like the devotees, if they don't want to be agitated by anything, right, materialistic thoughts or anything, all they have to do is just manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. That's it. Just focus on the chanting of the holy name, the transcendental samavation. Just focus on the form of Krishna, of Radha Gopinath. That's it. And the mind is not disturbed. But the yogis, they have no such thing. In fact, as I was mentioning last week in the class, that they use the person, they accept the existence of the personality of Godhead, but they use the personality of Godhead as a crutch to help them in their meditation to reach samadhi. So they use him as a means not to serve him. Their goal is not to serve him, but their goal is just to meditate him so that they can control the mind. Right? If the yogi is lucky, the yogi will see a difference between himself and the Paramatma. If not, the yogi will consider himself to be the Paramatma. Therefore, their destination can potentially be Vaikuntha. If one perfects oneself in yoga, one can potentially rise to Vaikuntha if he sees a distinction between the Paramatma and the soul. Otherwise, one will just reach the Brahma Jyoti, just like the Jnanis. The highest destination for the Jnanis is also Brahma Jyoti. The destination for the Karmis, or even the Karmakandis, is the higher planetary systems. Right? So because the yogis are following a very mechanistic method, just like, for example, the lust is there, right? So we can just focus on Krishna. Prabhupada said, if the lust is increasing, then increase your chanting. So that's what the devotee has to do. That's all the devotee has to do. The yogi, he has to undergo a mechanical way of controlling that. So for example, when one is undertaking the activity of sexual intercourse, or when one is evacuating. So these are activities of a type of vayu in our body. Prabhupada mentions the different types of vayus in our body in his purpose to Bhagavad Gita: samana, vyana, udana, apana, prana. These are the 5 different vayus. So the apana vayu is the vayu which is flowing downwards. So whatever work we perform with our genitals and with the backside, that's when the apana vayu is going downwards. So what the yogi has to do is he has to undertake the austerity of forcing that apana vayu to rise upwards instead. And when the apana vayu is rising upward, then there's no chance of that lusty thoughts appearing in the mind. So they undergo different types of practices. For example, there's an asana in the yoga, in Dhyana yoga. It's called Siddha Asana. So Siddha Asana means they sit in such a way that they place their heel in the perineum, which is where the Muladhara chakra is, at the base of the spine actually. So they place their heel there, and that along with different bandhas, they do different bandhas in their pranayama, or locks. They're called locks in English, they're called locks. One lock is called the Muladhara, the Mula Bandha. So they lock the bottom part of their body, and then that forces the apana vayu to flow upwards. And the apana vayu joins with the prana vayu, and then they get enlightenment, whatever happens. I don't know what happens. But the idea is that they're working in a very mechanical way to forcefully force their breath, the vayu, upwards, the apana vayu. And when these vayus, when they merge, then one can get mastery of the mind, and then one can meditate on the Paramatma like that. Whereas the devotee just has to meditate on Krishna. That's it. Just chant Hare Krishna. That's it. And we can see these different processes in terms of like the 6 philosophical systems that I was mentioning before. Right? The most gross is Karma Mimamsa. Then we have Sankhya, and we have Vaisheshika. So these really mechanical processes belong to those people in the consciousness of the karmis. And then we rise to the Gyan platform. And the Gyan platform is the philosophy of Nyaya, logic. Because the Gyanis, what do? They get their knowledge through inference. They get their knowledge through direct perception. So that is Nyaya. And then the yogis, they perform Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, whatever is mentioned in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And then you have finally the Vedanta philosophy, which is practiced by the Bhaktas. But even within Vedanta, there's different types of schools. So we belong to the school of Achintya Bheda Abheda. So that's one way that you can analyze it. Another way that you can analyze these same types of consciousness, karma, Gyan, yoga, and bhakti, is Srila Prabhupada mentions in the Krishna book, I think I mentioned before about Anandamai, about how everyone's base platform when they come to the material world is Annamoy platform. Annamoy platform means one is simply concerned simply about eating and satisfying the belly. And we can see that's very evident in the lower species like animals, for example. Just like I used to have a golden retriever dog before. And the only way, this dog would be happy simply if it got some food, that's it. That was its only source of pleasure. And sometimes we would take this dog to like a dog park, and there would be other dogs there like that. And then someone would just throw like a fruit, like an apple or something like that. And all the dogs would go running to try and eat the apple, and they would fight amongst each other. So my dog, she would get the apple, and then other dogs would try to get the apple out of her mouth, and she would like show her teeth like that and get the apple and run away somewhere far away and eat the apple. So we can see that animals are affected by this Annamoy platform, and human beings initially, if they're really gross, are also affected by the Annamoy platform as well. Higher than the Annamoy platform is the Pranamoy platform. Pranamoy platform is designated by defending the body, just defending one's existence, right? So we have eating, sleeping, mating, defending. So the eating part is the Annamoy platform, and then the sleeping, defending, and the mating is in reference to Pranamoy, just existing, taking care of the body nicely. That's the Pranamoy platform. Again, this is belonging to the karmis, the karmi platform. Higher than the Pranamoy platform is the Manomoy platform. So now we're starting to reach the level of Gyan. Now it's going from gross to more subtle. So we can see that people are now talking about mental health and how one should do meditation and how one should breathe deeply and take care of the mind. The mind should be peaceful. It's nothing spiritual, but at least they're trying to find happiness on the mental platform. So Srila Prabhupada mentions in the Krishna book, in that part, that the whole materialistic civilization is mainly characterized by Annamoy, Pranamoy, and Manomoy. Then we reach the stage of Vijnanamoy. After Manomoy is the stage of Vijnanamoy. Vijnanamoy means finally understanding that one is not the body, but one is a spirit soul. That's the Vijnanamoy platform. A Jnani may reach that platform. The perfection of yoga is definitely on the Vijnanamoy platform. But higher than the Vijnanamoy platform is the Anandamoy platform. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that the Anandamoy platform begins at the Brahma Bhuta platform. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na shochiti na kangshati samaserveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. Krishna has mentioned that when one reaches the Brahma Bhuta platform, that platform is like a springboard to mad bhaktim labate param, to reaching my pure devotion. So we can see that the perfection of the yoga process, which is to understand I am a spirit soul, and next to me in my body is Paramatma, and I should have a relationship with him. And the yogi can see the Paramatma and the individual soul in the hearts of every single living entity, right? This is the perfection of the yoga process. So Anandamoy platform starts from the platform of perfection in the yoga process. Because the bhakta, he starts by understanding, I'm not the body, I'm a spirit soul, right? Krishna mentions that right at the start of the Bhagavad Gita. He teaches Arjuna about the science of the soul. I am not the body, I am the spirit soul. All these kings who have assembled here on the battlefield, they're also not their body, they're also the spirit soul as well. So the devotee automatically sees that he's a spirit soul, and he sees that all other living entities are spirit souls as well. And that I should render service to Krishna. So not the Paramatma, but Krishna. Krishna is present outside as Bhagwan, and Krishna is present inside as Paramatma. So this is the Anandamoy platform. It starts with Brahma Bhuta and it rises to the stage of pure devotion. So one thing I'll finish with these 5 points. I read it last night in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the glories of Krishna, which he displayed when he advented himself 5,000 years ago. And there's a verse, it's the last verse, I believe, or the second last verse in the 10th canto. In the last 90th chapter, in the 10th canto, it's the last or the second last verse. And there Shukadev Goswami is glorifying the devotional process as distinct from the other processes, and he's glorifying Krishna himself. It's a really nice verse. And there's 5 different characteristics of Krishna that he displayed when he came 5,000 years ago that no other incarnation showed before him. The first one is Krishna's dham. Right? Generally when an incarnation comes into the material world, the incarnation doesn't bring their own abode, their own dham. The only exception would be someone like Ramachandra. When Ramachandra was here, along with Ramachandra came Ayodhya Dham as well. And this Ayodhya Dham exists eternally in the spiritual world as well, in the spiritual sky as well. But if we look at all other incarnations, like if you look at Nrsimha or Matsya or Varaha, they come, but they don't bring their abode with them. Right? They act within the material world. Like Matsya, he's swimming in the Garbhodaka ocean. Right? Or Varaha, he's fighting with Hiranyaksha in the shell, within the shell of the universe. He's not in his transcendental abode. Whereas Krishna, along with Krishna's associates, Krishna brought Sri Vrindavan Dham as well. And within Vrindavan, we know there's Govardhan Hill, there's a river, Yamuna, all these things are there. So Krishna brought all these things. And it's mentioned that Krishna's bringing the Dham, it eclipsed the importance of the river Ganges. Shastra mentions that prior to the Yamuna descending to this material world, within Sri Vrindavan Dham, the most famous, the most beloved tirtha that all these sages and the rishis would visit was actually the river Ganges. But then when Krishna came, and along with Krishna, Vrindavan Dham came, Yamuna was there, then because Krishna personally bathed in the Yamuna, there's Shastric verses which actually explain that the significance on the importance and the potency of the river Yamuna was much more greater than the river Ganges actually. So this is the first thing. Krishna brings his dham. The second thing is Krishna's compassion. Krishna's compassion is unrivaled compared to that seen by any other avatar. Just like the example is given that Krishna gave liberation not only to his dear beloved associates, his devotees that came along with him, like the Brajabasis or the queens in Dwarka, but Krishna also gave full liberation, full emancipation to even demons, like Shishupal, like Putana, right? Putana, she became Krishna's nurse in Golok Vrindavan, or Kamsa. Even though they were demons, and technically demons even when they're killed by the Supreme Personality Godhead, they actually attain Sayujya Mukti, or Ekatvam. But here we see that Krishna actually gave them Sarupya Mukti. He gave them four-handed forms. He gave them residences with his personal associates in his personal planets in Vaikuntha. And some, like Putana, he took them directly back to the highest planet in the spiritual world, Golok Vrindavan. So this is Krishna's mercy. Last week I was explaining about how all the soldiers who died in Kurukshetra, even though they hadn't begun their process of devotion, they hadn't undertaken that austerity, still every single soldier who died in the presence of Krishna, they attained their spiritual bodies and they went back to the spiritual world. So that's Krishna's compassion. The third thing that Krishna brought, which was unique, was his opulence. Prior to Krishna coming, we see that opulence was considered to be that of Vaikuntha, that displayed by Lakshmi and Narayan in Vaikuntha. Right? Like ornate furniture, palaces, jewelry, really opulent worship. This was considered to be opulence. But Krishna, as I was mentioning earlier in this class, he displayed a different type of opulence. And that opulence is not Aishwarya opulence, it's the opulence of sweetness. So it's a completely different opulence that Krishna displayed. The opulence of simplicity, but intense love for Krishna within that simple environment of just a cowherd village. So that's a different type of opulence that Krishna displayed, which is not known to people before. Then the fourth one is that Krishna brought his name. So in the purport to that verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, the example which is given is that verse is quoted from the Shastra, that if you chant Krishna's name once, you get as much benefit as chanting the Vishnu Sahasranam 3 times. If you chant 1,000 names of Vishnu 3 times, so if you chant 3,000 names of Vishnu, you get the same benefit as chanting Krishna's name once. So Krishna's name, Golokera Premadana Hari Nam Sankirtana, right? Krishna's name, it descended, Prem Nam descended from Golok Vrindavan into the realms of this mature world. So Krishna brought his name with him. The last thing that Krishna brought, Krishna brought so many things, but in this particular analysis, the last thing that Krishna established was dharma. Now that dharma you can take on different levels. You can take it as dharma samstapanayataya sambhavami yuge yuge paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam. You can think of it in that way, that Krishna initially came to establish the dharma of establishing rightful and religiously motivated rulers like Yudhishthira Maharaj on the throne. And him and Balaram came to annihilate all the demons who were burdening the earth, right? That's what we read in Krishna book at the start, why the demigods approached Krishna, why Bhumi Devi, she approached Krishna. And that's one reason why Krishna came, to establish the dharma of killing the demons and establishing his devotees as the rightful rulers and governors of this earth planet. But if we take it on a more internal level, the dharma that Krishna really established is Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. He established the dharma of fully and exclusive devotion to himself, completely rejecting everything else, all these other philosophies we're talking about, karma, yoga, jnana, to get rid of all of these and to establish the dharma of simply surrendering to Krishna. This is the real dharma that Krishna came to establish. So this is something which is very easy for the bhaktas. All we have to do is just meditate on the Shastra, like just like Prabhu was saying, that when we read Srila Prabhupada's books, we naturally start to meditate on what Srila Prabhupada has said. So in the same way, when we read, when we chant, when we take darshan, naturally thoughts and samskars, spiritual impressions are being built in our mind. So it's not a mechanical process, it's a very natural process. Prabhupada says that this chanting of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is not an artificial imposition on the mind. It's something natural. Just right now it's dormant, that's it. So bhakti is something that awakens it. Okay? So thank you, we'll finish here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.